feel like the top two things you see men complain about most is not having sex and not being able to talk to their partner or have the empathy from their partner when they're going through something.
And I think the reason for this is because women usually haven't had to practice or utilize those skills. Especially attractive women can get by without having very much empathy. They can get by with it. They haven't had to practice that skill set because they can get by on just being a woman or on their looks. And most guys are not going to check a woman.
I think too, with feminism and women becoming hyper independent and competing with men too, they also don't care as much about their problems. And even if it's not actively in the front of their mind, we've been conditioned to be strong women and do things on your own. There are a lot of masculine women now. And so they kind of are stuck where they express their emotions and their problems, right? And they expect validation.
Right.
But then when a man expresses it, they're kind of like, oh, you need to man up.
Women don't care about men's feelings. Now, this is such an interesting topic because it is definitely, if you look around the internet, you will discover that this is talked about quite a bit.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes in very negative ways, but it is a real problem. It's a real problem that guys struggle with. The idea of this episode came from, we had a comment on our Clips channel, and a guy had said something like, talking to a woman about your feelings is like being
in the desert with an empty water bottle or something.
Yeah, it's worse than when you started, right? Mm-hmm. And even though he said it in a rough way, I would say that it does echo a majority of men's experience, right? Most men would be like, yeah. And a lot of men in relationships have given up. And they're like, I'm just not going to talk to her about my feelings. Don't ever. In fact, there's a lot of advice out there that never talk to a woman about your feelings.
Right. And then women are like, no, talk to me about your feelings.
It's a trap.
Yeah. And then men,
right.
Do it and it doesn't turn out good. And then they never want to do it.
Yeah. It gets used against them. They're afraid they are vulnerable. And then, and then it gets used against them multiple times. And so I think that's the big fear that men have. So I think it's worth addressing in this episode to give some validation to, this is generally men's experience. It's not, and again, none of our stuff is ever to shit on anyone, but it's not to shit on women because...
Well, we already talked about how, when we did the episode about what we've learned this year, you talked about, validating women's emotions. And even in other episodes, you've talked about it. So it's not like we're saying that women, their emotions never get validated too. We've already hit on that. So this is just more about the man's perspective, because you are right. I feel like the top two things you see men complain about most is not having sex and not being able to talk to their partner or have the empathy from their partner when they're going through something. Yeah. And it's stuff that we've worked through too in our episodes, because we're all growing and learning, right? There's so many things. So I think the thing I wanted to start out with is an understanding of why are women like this. It's not because they're bad or evil or, a lot of guys want to use that, right? Right.
And I think there's a few different reasons. I think the primary intrinsic reason that's not due to external factors, we'll talk about that in a little bit, is because women really, I got to be careful how I say this, but women often lack empathy, even though they think they have empathy. They think they're extremely empathetic. And that empathy is actually sympathy. And the difference between empathy and sympathy is when you care about something or someone, and empathy is when you relate to their experience, where you put yourself in their shoes. And because women generally are the ones who are championing causes. They care about animals, they care about children, they care about what's happening in the world and world peace and the environment and all of those things. And those are good things. But oftentimes women think that's the same as empathy. And it's really not. And especially when it comes to men. And so, and I think the reason for this is because women usually haven't had to practice or utilize those skills. They haven't had to, especially attractive women can get by without having very much empathy. I'm not saying that all attractive women don't have empathy, but what I'm saying is that they can get by with it. They haven't had to practice that skill set because they can get by on just being a woman or on their looks. And most guys are not going to check a woman. they're not going to, or they're going to check out. They're going to say, okay, I can't talk to her about, she doesn't have any empathy, so I'm not going to get into a situation where I get hurt trying to be understood or felt. So I think that's a lot of the reason why, is because it hasn't been a skill that's had to be practiced.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. And I think we talked a little bit about this before, but I think too, with like feminism and women becoming hyper independent and competing with men too, they like also don't care as much about their problems. And even if it's not actively in the front of their mind,
right,
we've been conditioned, to like be strong women and do things on your own. And like, so there are a lot of masculine women now. And so they kind of are stuck where they express their emotions and their problems, right? And they expect validation.
Right.
But then when a man expresses it, they're kind of like, you need to man up. You know what I mean? So like they're kind of in more of a masculine frame when a guy comes to them with a problem, but they're still expecting their emotions to be validated, and they're not doing the same for the man that they're with. Right.
And there's some truth to, or some validity to that stance to a degree, right? Because, and I guess we'll kind of jump around, but to jump to one of the future topics in this is that as a man, it's not attractive for you to dump your emotions on a woman. She doesn't care that your ex-girlfriend broke your heart, right? For instance, that makes her less attracted to you, not more attracted to you, right? Mm-hmm. Like as a man, you do have to be guarded in some degree. There's stuff that you share with your guy friends, especially things around your weaknesses, your true weaknesses. And there's a difference between weakness and vulnerability. You can be vulnerable with a woman, but you should not be weak around a woman, because that is not attractive. And so I think there's some confusion there. I think women tend to be repulsed sometimes by any of a guy's negative emotions, and that's the lack of empathy part. Right. Whereas there's a natural part that's like, okay, yeah, he's supposed to be a man and he is supposed to be tough, right? I saw another TikTok where a guy was like, yeah, she wants you to be a soldier, but even soldiers get wounded, right? And then what happened? And there's truth to it, but at the same time, are you out there being the soldier? Right. It's just like I did it in a video on my channel today. I was like, look, when your mom dies, or your dad dies, or you have a traumatic experience, you're looking, you're breaking down in that moment. Yeah, of course you expect empathy and support, and to be able to share that because that's a really big thing that's happening. But if it's every little thing and every little setback and, oh, this upset me, and you're acting like a woman in terms of your emotional response to things, it's not going to be attractive. And you should not expect that a woman is going to show you empathy for and understand all of your feelings about every little thing. But you as a man need to do that for a woman. Right. Because it's a different role. She can vent, she can dump all of her emotional baggage onto you, and you're supposed to be strong enough to handle that. But you don't really get the shoulder to cry on as a man. You still need to have vulnerable conversations and have connection, but it's not the same. Right. Well, yeah, I think if it's major life things that you're going through, yeah, like you should be able to talk to your partner. I think it's the things that would maybe make her afraid of the safety, like her safety. Like if you're worried about providing safety, then she's obviously going to be worried about safety being provided for her. Right. And then she might get more in a masculine frame because now she feels like, well, he can't handle doing, providing the safety anymore or right now. So I need to do it for myself. And that's why I brought it up, because I do think it's a more masculine thing when women act that way, because it is a masculine thing for a man to be like, just suck it up. Men talk to each other and they'll be like, oh, well, this happened. And a guy would be like to another guy, just suck it up, or just, let it go, deal with it. Yeah. And I think women also sometimes might get more masculine like that if, one, they are treated that way with their own emotions with their partner. And then two, if maybe he's doing it too much
and he's appearing weak to her, she might try to toughen him up by being like, you know, just get over it. Like, you can figure this out or whatever, you know, being less empathetic.
Right.
But like you said, because the thing is that empathy is a feminine trait.
Right.
Like, it is. I feel like women are more likely and more able to put themselves in other people's shoes. Because like you said, they do typically care more about all the things that, you know, kind of pull at people's heartstrings.
Right.
And so when they aren't doing that naturally, they're not fully in their feminine in that aspect.
Yeah.
And again, I do believe that women have been conditioned for a very long time to be more masculine. And, you know, a lot of women are told, you know, when they come to their partner with their problems, just get over it, or, you know, I don't care, or, you know, whatever sort of masculine phrase that a lot of guys say.
Yeah.
And so you know, I'm not turning this into a woman thing, but they don't know how to do it.
Right.
Like, and like you said, it's like they either never had to learn, or from the very beginning, they're being trained, you know, like, you got to handle this yourself, and you got to go out and do the stuff. And like, no, regardless of your emotions, you got to figure it out. So we're not even learning how to be feminine and truly empathetic from the very beginning.